time, but no one is here to help me. No one. This is the garbage freaking nonsense. No one, no one. Everyone's like, oh yeah, you just go fill this form. I'm like,
Guys, we can hear you.
but
Mute yourself.
So we're writing the image copy and the
amazing.
post copy. Yeah. I didn't know sometimes Microsoft gives us the image copy.
Okay. So we got that technicality out of the way. Hello, everyone. What's happening here? What's the noises?
Molim.
That's life, Avi. That's life.
Eh?
Mute all upon entry. Okay. This is good. So hello, everyone joining us. We're going to slowly let people in. There's some people in the... If you have... Helen, mute yourself. Oh, I see what's happening here. Okay, I have a lot of... Windows are open. Technical issues. Okay, now I don't hear any noises. So hello everyone who's joining us. We're going to start the talk in about 15 minutes or so. In the meantime, I'd love to see people. I would love to introduce yourself. Say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from. What do you do? Let me see. I want to see people in the audience. Turn on your camera so I can see you. Let's have a conversation. Let's see where you're from. Ralph. Hello, Ralph. I'm going to waste some time. How you doing? If you want to talk to me, unmute yourself.
We need like 9 ideas for. There's 3.
How's it going? So where are you from?
Three ideas.
Oh, you got to unmute.
Hey, I'm from Philadelphia.
Philadelphia.
And,
oh, cool. What time is it there?
Would you say that?
It is about noon.
Noon. Okay. Good.
Almost lunchtime. Yeah, perfect.
What do you do?
Sorry?
What do you do?
I recently finished the UX design course at Career Foundry, and I'm a career changer coming from the event design industry. So I've been designing trade shows for a while. So I'm moving from 3D to 2D.
Ah. Are you also disappointed from the state of the web and some of the stuff that we're seeing here? I mean, I don't know if that's what we hear from. I mean, all the craziness that Vitaly is going to talk to us about soon. About I mean, do you have any frustrating moments in surfing the web?
I hope to learn some more about that. Pop-up windows are probably the most annoying thing I've encountered. Yeah,
it's coming. It's coming.
It's
we're going to talk about. I'm annoyed with the fact that I have to put in when I put in a new password, like 8 letters, capital letters. You got to give in your left kidney, to make sure that you get the good password to the people who want that. And I don't know if there's anything we can do about that. Maybe we can discuss that as well.
Don't reveal too much, Avi.
Ah, okay. I haven't seen your talk.
You're going to give the entire talk on my behalf. That's how you operate.
Okay, so I'll shut up. Thanks.
I'm just kidding. Don't worry.
Let's talk to Edie. Edie? I don't know. Yes, it's you.
Hi.
Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah. You're perfect. No one gets it correct for the first time.
Where are you from?
Istanbul, Turkey.
Ooh, that's cool. Vitaly, have you been to Istanbul?
Yes, 3 times, I think. That was interesting. I was stuck in traffic both times for over an hour, but I always made it on time because I knew how it is. But it's always fun. It's always great to be in Turkey, in Istanbul.
What's that? Mute yourself. I have been to, I flew over Istanbul, actually. I've seen that beautiful bridge from the window. I was like, oh, yeah.
Ah, yeah, that's magical.
Yeah,
that's cool.
We have 2 of those. I'm a UX writer at Fab Health. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So good to have you here. And you have any frustrating stuff happening in the UX writing world?
Well, right now they just hired a UX writer. They didn't have any. So I'm just trying to make the UI copy as short and as understandable as possible for all reading levels, which is going good so far, but we will see when everything, because I'm also creating the guidelines for them. So we will see how it goes in the long run.
Okay, well, good to have you here. I will speak to one more person. Who is this? Marietta, I can see you. How you doing?
Hello everyone.
I'm so amazed at how like everyone from around the world all of a sudden joining. Where are you from?
I'm from Greece.
Greece.
Oh, that's
Yes.
fantastic too.
That's nice to have you. And
Yeah.
how is it going over there? How's what do you do?
So I'm a product designer in a startup called Prosperity, which
Okay.
has to do with real estate.
Ah, okay. That's cool. Is there
Mhm.
any reason why you are attending this event? What did you want to learn or something that you can share with
It's
us?
yeah, it seemed very interesting. So I just joined to get to know you all and learn new things.
Okay. So good to have you here. I'm going to start. I have like a few minutes to share with you some things about what we're doing tonight. So I'm going to start my presentation, and then in about 10 minutes we're going to start the actual talk, Vitaly.
Yes,
Okay,
sure.
so let me
I'm
share
all
my
ready.
You ready?
Oh, you have no
I hope
idea.
so.
I've been waiting for this for years now.
I'm glad that finally we have arrived. Okay, so let me share my screen. And it is this one. Okay, share. So this is the officially UX Salon event, and welcome everyone for participating, for participating. Tonight we're going to speak about frustrating design patterns in 2021, and we're going to see how we can solve them. Okay, what else? I don't know what. Okay, so if you haven't said hello, everyone, please introduce yourself in the chat so we can get to know you. We want to see how many people there, where are you from. That's always interesting. If you have friends in the industry, and this is a very important event, I think. We have a lot of things to discuss, and so many things are going on. If you have friends in the industry, tell your friends to join us on Zoom. We're going to paste. Daphna is helping us. Daphna, hi. She's going to paste the link directly to Zoom. So you can grab that, send it to your friends, and tell them to join us here tonight. That would be cool. Okay, so you all remember this, right? Physical events. There are some events happening these days, but not enough, and we want to come back to that. Everyone is sitting together, but we're doing it online today. So I want to kind of talk to you a little bit about the benefits of online versus offline and how we can make the most out of this event. Because if you can recall, we used to be, dressing up nicely, going out in the car, going to the event, parking, going in, saying hello to people, networking, and then sitting and watching the event, turning our phone off or, watching the event, being focused on the event itself. And then at the end, there was question and answers. That was the usual lay of the land. But as we know today, it's not like that. And the benefits of creating online is that it's a live event. And but it's rarely that we take the time with all the distractions. So I ask you to turn off your phones, be focused on in this hour, completely in this event, and make the most out of it by first of all chatting or adding comments as you hear them, as you feel them during the event. So one thing that is, let me see, it doesn't. Okay, so live chat. If you have a question in the live chat, mark a Q in front of that question so we can actually spot it, maybe later answer it, and Vitaly can see that and say maybe we can answer it live or at the end. And if you just want to chat and comment and respond without the Q. So that's one thing. And I think that's the benefit of a live event versus watching it later on YouTube is that exactly that's the live chat, that we can actually participate and get to know people and talk. And that does not happen on YouTube. And of course, when you say to yourself, I'm going to watch it later on YouTube, it's always an excuse to not watch it. You'll start watching the first 5 minutes and then you skip and then so be here now. Okay, so the second thing is we have our shared notes. This is a great idea by Vitaly that introduced me to this event. So shared notes, like if you're writing notes, why don't share it with other people? And we have a document you can see in the chat now. Daphna is pasting the link to that. Write the notes there. Let us know what you think, what you learned, and maybe together we can create a collective learning document. The second thing is a networking spreadsheet. If you are want to get to, if you're looking for a job, if you're looking to hire, if you want to get to know people, there's a spreadsheet that we created. Put your name there, and that's going to be even relevant at the end of the event, after the Q&A. We're going to have a live.
Oh, I think, Avi, you just muted yourself by accident.
Unmute. Okay, thank you for
Now
that.
you're back. Sure.
So we're going to have a breakout room. We're going to break out into groups of small groups and get to know people as we, and kind of network. That's how we used to do it in events in the past, where we just walk into a room, say hello to someone. Where are you from? What do you do? So we're going to do that in small groups. If you want to stay for the end of the event, that's going to be the benefit of tonight. Also, I want to share with you, if you were looking for a gift to anyone who's, UX lovers, we have, UX t-shirts, you see? This, the UX insignia. This is a cool t-shirt. You're welcome to come to uxsalon.com/uxwear. And I would like for you guys to take out your phone and follow UX Salon on Instagram. And take photos of how you're watching this event. Are you at home? Are you outside? Where are you from? Where are you looking at the screen? And then we'll reshare it. And of course, it's a good reason to follow UX Salon. There's a lot of content, and we publish about future events, so you don't miss them. With interesting things happening on Instagram. So please follow UX Salon on Instagram. That would be cool to see you there. And we're also doing some events, prizes, and like discounts and cool things that you don't want to miss. If you don't want that, also we have it on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also a great platform to keep in touch. Look for us on LinkedIn. Also, Daphna would post the link to that. And the hashtag for today is UX Salon. So if you're tagging us in any social media, please add UX Salon to it. Last thing, if you have an interesting talk, please talk to me later. Send me a message. I'd love to host you here on this platform. And as I said, just to say, at the end of the event, we're going to stay and we're going to talk. So we're going to have a breakout room. So that would be it, I think. Let me see if I have not missed anything. Oh, so yes, we got a Form UX workshop coming up this month, Vitaly.
Is that true, Avi? I had no idea. Tell me more.
Hold on, let me unstop sharing. Okay, Vitaly. So I'm kind of excited about this. This is going to be a full workshop, 2 days event. Tell me, why do we need to learn about form design in 2021? I mean, isn't it solved already? I mean, forms.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Avi, because this is what I was thinking 2 years ago before actually thinking about forms altogether. Well, first of all, it's kind of 2 sessions and 2.5 hours each. And it's kind of designed in a way for us to be interacting, to be discussing, to figure out the truth, the ultimate source of truth about forms. And I've been spending quite a bit of time around really complicated forms. I'm not talking about like simple checkouts or newsletter subscriptions, things like that. But what if you have to deal with some sort of enterprise form when you're working for the government, or maybe you're working just for your company that actually has a lot of forms to deal with? That's kind of has been my field of study, I would say, over the last 2 years. And I discovered things that you will never believe me exist. And I discovered that certain things, when we challenge the status quo, can work way, way better. And that goes for everything from inline validation to disabled submit buttons, to the way we allow people to fill in forms and how we choose if it's an input field, a text area, or segmented control. It's actually getting really, really complicated very quickly. And so I thought maybe there is a way of putting all of those things together so we can all benefit from it. Because actually, as we will learn just in a few minutes, one of the most frustrating parts about design today is not necessarily pop-ups that we all hate and cookie prompts that we all hate, but actually it's forms, because they're usually just poorly designed. So let's fix that.
Wow, you're on fire. It seems like you're really passionate about this.
Oh, you have no idea how much I care about forms. I think, and because they connect everything. The same like design and accessibility and like an interaction design. It's like the magical part. I wish everything on the web had more forms, or maybe less. But we'll see that.
In terms of like, I heard it's like a 70% abandonment rate on forms. People don't.
For shopping or for e-commerce, it is very common to get between 60 to 70% abandonment, and that's high. But it's not only because people can't use forms. It's just, people do shopping offline in a similar way they do online. So they just walk, look, go back, and then walk, maybe come again, and so on. So, but in general, it's a very high number. Yes.
So good design, I guess, could maybe lower those numbers, and that's why
not to zero, but
not to zero.
to 40% or 50% for sure.
Okay, so Daphne, please post the link to that workshop if you guys want to join. We will, welcome to join. There's a link there. So, okay, so Vitaly, the floor is yours. It's already like the time.
Excellent.
And,
I've been waiting for this for so long. All right, so if you don't mind, I'm just taking over and start sharing the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay, so I hope you will be able to hear and see me clearly. Just a quick note from my end. This is not just me talking. I want to see you all. I mean, not all. I don't want you to go ahead, and I don't want to force you to turn on the camera. But if you have the camera on, that's nice, because I can then see you right here in my little grid right there. People. Oh, these are people. Oh, this is so nice. Hello, everyone. So it's so nice to see you all here. I'm just coming from a strange experience. I was speaking at a conference in Croatia with 2,500 people, live, in person. And I was scared. I was so scared. And I thought, wow, I'm really missing people. So it feels like I really missed you. So wonderful to see you here. Speaking about the horrors and nightmares of the web, right? This is what we like, I guess. This is why 175 people came in. Now, let's see what we've got, right? I think that all of us have some stories to share. And I think that many of us have some really sad stories to see about the web. And when I think about the web, over the last 2 years or so, it's been, we've been in a pretty strange situation. And so once you're stuck at home, you realize, that carpet, that could use some cleaning, or maybe that wall, maybe it needs some repainting, right? This is what I felt. But at the same time, the same thing happened to me on the web. I feel like that model, maybe it should be done differently. Or maybe, that form, no, that could be done better, right? So you kind of start looking, you start paying attention, and you quickly realize how frustrating things actually have become, or partly become at least. And so I always start with this by kind of looking into how we make decisions online, right? And I think it's actually very important to keep that in the loop and keep it in mind, because our creative process is never a linear process. It's always bound by process, it's bound by people we're working with, it's bound by budgets. There are so many restrictions that force us into this field of frustrating patterns. It's not because we want to make something horrible. I mean, when I look at you, you are nice people. I don't see not nice people, not even a single person. You're nice people, but we end up creating interfaces that actually frustrate people sometimes a little bit more than they help. And I try to understand, why is it happening? Well, we have constraints. We can't just do whatever we want. We always have to navigate this kind of really small tunnels to find how to get to, to meet the deadline, or to, finish a project on a budget, and so forth. And so we kind of try to move as we're designing, right, from one area to the next, from one point in here to the next one. And as we make these decisions, eventually we'll be hitting these dead ends where we have to reroute and find our way back and find our way forward, which forces us almost to rely on design patterns, right? This is what we've been doing for a long time now, for almost a decade, where this thing has been following us forever. I think I've shown it like thousands of times. Which one of these two possible websites are you designing today? The one on the left or the one on the right? Because this is what the web has become, because we like to rely on design patterns, right? And we kind of tend to use things that used to work in the past. But the result is a little bit suboptimal, I would say, right? How did we come to the world in which this is acceptable? I mean, all of us, I think, when we look at this, think, oh, well, wow, this is just not okay, right? But we kind of got to the world where this seems to be acceptable. Now, things like, things that some websites were doing in the past are not acceptable, but this is acceptable. So when we look into Ryanair, for example, I also show this example quite a bit. If you ever booked a flight with Ryanair, you will know that you can opt out from insurance, but to opt out from insurance, you need to find opt-out insurance conveniently located between Denmark and Finland in the country selector, right? Now, that's not just frustrating, that's just evil, pure evil. And we don't accept that anymore in 2021. I mean, if this happened to us in 2021, that would be a big outcry on social media. This would never go right, right? This is why, this is a screenshot from 2014. But we do other things, right? We do these things. Some of this might have seen this before, right? You have a wonderful, beautiful Instagram ad, and in order to generate more clicks, you just Photoshop in a hair. And guess what? People click on that image because nobody wants to have a hair, even if they don't have hair, on their phone, right? How horrible is that as a practice that we ended up with? And we also used to all these things that are just around us. Somebody just bought this, and somebody just got that, and somebody from your location just created this. But if you're looking behind the scenes, and this is kind of the frustrating part to me, very often you see just a little script that randomly combines locations, random names, random last names, random products, right? This is what happens behind the scenes. That makes me very, very sad. And sometimes it goes to extremes. And many of us remember these beauties, right? Nobody gets excited about, filling in a captcha every morning, I guess. But this is just a part of the web today as well. Now, luckily, we don't get that anymore because they have changed the spirit of captcha still prevails on the web because they kind of got resurrected in the form of crosswalks and traffic lights and fire hydrants and whatever you want, right? And this is what we kind of expected to do almost every single day. So as of last year, I had a bit of time and I was interviewing students in the University of Amsterdam, trying to figure out what they like, what they don't like, how they feel about the web, and what are particular things that they find frustrating. Now, I have to admit that this was a very kind of small size group. It was 68 people. But I just wanted to figure out what are those things that they don't like, right? Because I don't know about you, but I remember when I got to the web for the first time, I was super excited about everything. I mean, there were things where I could just edit the HTML file, put it on a server, share it with some random pages around the web, and use FTP to deploy, and off we go. It's live. That was magical time for me. They don't see the web as magical time. That made me very, very sad. So I wanted to fix that. So I asked them, what is it that they don't like? And the same things come up. Tiny scrollable panes, for example. Imagine if you have some sort of an e-commerce site and you have filters for brands, and you have maybe, 150 brands, and you have this little tiny, 30 pixel area which you have to scroll to find and select your filters. Nobody likes that. In the same way, like nobody likes tiny click targets. So email newsletter is the best of them, right? You make them so small to make it very, very difficult to opt out. But you know what? People are very good at opting out. I think we need to set up some sort of a world Guinness record of people opting out at the same time, because people are extremely good at not doing things that they're forced to do. This is what we've learned in the 20 years of the web. It's very difficult to force people to do anything, be it a newsletter sign up, or really anything else. We'll talk about it a bit later, right? And then people don't like when things move all of a sudden. That's not surprising. You have advertising coming in, or image gets resized, or anything like that. People don't like it when menus open on hover, especially, this is probably the best example, when you have some sort of a search bar above the menu. So every time you go to the search bar, the menu opens up, being really frustrating and annoying. People like it when they have control, and that means tap menus, click menus. We'll look into that as well. Oh, this is fantastic. Country selector drop down. If you happen to be from the Netherlands, you just screwed big time. Because where are you going to search for yourself in a country selector? You might be one of the fancy companies or fancy countries, so you will be prioritized and be listed somewhere on the top. You might be the Netherlands, or if it's an old system in place, then you might be Holland. So you kind of go all the way, and then it also might be in a foreign language. So good luck trying to search, where you find yourself, right? Generic error messages that don't communicate anything. There is a mistake. Good luck finding it or fixing it. Back buttons that don't work well. Next buttons that are disabled. Filters that freeze every time you type in something. Again, imagine an e-commerce scenario, and you might have a couple of filters that you want to set up, the pricing, the size, the color, and so on. And every time you tap somewhere, the entire UI freezes, and you have to wait until it comes back to you, right? Tooltips that cover input, sliders that are very, very difficult to navigate, password requirements, which are extremely ridiculous. And sometimes people use this thing where they have their password that they keep reusing on less important websites. And so if your website requires slightly more aggressive requirements, right? Input. So you need to add some special characters, anything like that. What people do is they use that character set that they actually use all the time. They just add those characters that are needed to pass the gates. Who does that? Please raise your hand. Oh, I see Rob doing that. Excellent, right? And then comes the magical part, the birthday picker that starts, like this widget that starts at 2021. And I always think, this is not right. This doesn't feel right to me. And then you have beauties of the web called scroll jacking and parallax. And of course, again, identifying buses and crosswalks. This is what people don't like. So my job for the last 2 years was really trying to find ways and find patterns, better patterns, I would say, to fix all of those things. And this is actually also the part of the workshop we're going to do on forms. And we also did the same, something similar on navigation. And my goal is really not just to say, oh, let's make the web better for users. Of course, this has to be the goal, but it cannot be the only goal, because my goal is, when I'm working with companies, is to find something that helps the users, but at the same time helps businesses get to their goals, right? So I kind of try to find the balance. I know that businesses need data, or I know that businesses need attention. I know that businesses need clicks or engagement. And my goal is to find a way to make that experience, or create an experience that is also beautiful and decent and wonderful for users or visitors of the site, so they actually do that thing that businesses actually want, right? So for the next, like what, 1 hour or so, I don't know, Avi, you will never be able to stop me at this point. Now that I go, I have literally 685 slides to go through, and I'm not even joking. If you look at the numbers, it's 624. This is how far we could go. We don't have to, but we could. There are plenty of user frustrations on the web.
Let's start.
Okay, well, now, once we have that, let's fix some of those. And the first one that people don't like, at least designers don't like, are carousels. Do I have any fans of carousels in the house? Please write a plus in the chat. Sorry, because it's easy to see the chat. Any carousel fans? Patrick is a fan. Great, Patrick. Nasya doesn't like them, like, at all. Okay. Okay, not many fans of carousels, but Mikolas loves them. And in fact, what's not to like? Look at how beautiful they can be. That's a beautiful, wonderful carousel with a carousel in the background as well. That's beautiful. Unfortunately, most of the time, these carousels are not really well designed. Now, we ended up in the world where this is something that we're used to when you think about the carousel. We have an arrow, we have the dots, which indicate some sort of progress, right? And this is how we navigate a carousel. Right? This is pretty much it. This is all we've got, right? But when we look at them, you really need to work very hard to understand, why do you need to actually click through this carousel, right? Well, there are different kinds of carousels, of course. When you look in Turkish websites, which I did for fun, because everybody has time during the lockdown, this is a different kind of carousel. These are not the carousels we might be used to, like, at all. They don't use dots at all. Instead, there are plenty of numbers. Is it better? Is it worse? At least it gives you a state of a carousel, right? You can say, oh, go to number 13. That's better than, count, 13 from the left, right? Probably not what we want, right? But still, it kind of gives us an idea. Maybe they could look different. Now, on mobile, there are plenty of dots for your convenience. So if you ever wanted more dots in your life, here we go. You find all of them right there. But if you keep going, I was really asking myself, why is it that there are no dots used in Turkey? That's just really strange. And then sometimes, eventually, I stumbled upon Milliyet, news website, I guess, which is just, I would say an exhibit to me. There are all kind of carousels you ever wanted in one. Do you want a horizontal one with numbers? Go for it. You want a vertical one with numbers? Oh, we have one. We have one with thumbnails. Sure, here we go. And then, of course, a traditional small little content slider, because why not? Now, sometimes they look a little bit different, but sometimes they're just confusing, which we definitely need to fix. Can you tell me how this carousel works? Anybody? So we have numbers, 1, 2, 3. What would you do here to swipe through the carousel? Do you know that this is a carousel? Yeah, so Alice is right. So you would click on number 2, and then you would click on number 3, right? So instead of using dots, we will be using numbers, which kind of swipe to the left, and then you have these layers moving back and forth. But do you know what people do in tests? When I was testing this, People click like crazy on those different layers, which have different backgrounds, because they expect them to be interactive. They are not. This is where frustration comes from. Here's another example. Can you tell me how this works? So you have something on the left, right? And you have some text next to it. Any ideas? Yes, so we usually would be expecting that we can drag the slider, right? Well, unfortunately, this is not quite how it works, because it is actually a horizontal carousel. In order to use it, to move it, you actually have to swipe left and right, which is not quite what you were expecting. In fact, it doesn't matter where you tap, right? You actually end up literally kind of going to the beginning or to the end of the carousel, right? And so if you wanted to move it around, you actually need to swipe left, and then it indicated something is changing. And I think this is very symbolic, because every time we have this mismatch of the movement and the orientation of the design component, we have problems like that. The same thing can happen in very different scenarios, like here, right? So here we also have a carousel on the right upper corner, but there are two arrows, right, indicating the direction of the carousel. And yes, it kind of is aligned, so because you're moving vertically, but that's not quite what we would be expecting from a carousel like that, right? So this is where, and it's also not sliding or kind of moving, it's more abrupt, right? And I mean, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I get those things all the time. Here's another one, right? Can you tell me how this works? There is a carousel on the left. And there is a ... floating for some reason as well. Now, this is where we take a carousel, we have these dots, right? But then we group these dots to indicate a particular category, and you can jump to one or the other part of the carousel, right? And that seems to me maybe over-engineered a little bit, because it seems just too complicated. So when we look at this, and we look at all these examples, they all share one thing in common, right? They all share one sentiment, that we don't need carousels in our life, right? And in fact, designers like ourselves create passive-aggressive websites, should I use a carousel.com, answering a question within a carousel, right? Which is kind of funny. But then when we look into data, you know, when we look into this typical carousels that we've seen previously, yes, how many people see number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5? 2 to 3%. That's not much. So we could say, let's kill the carousel and go home and forget about them. Not so fast, because this story is not complete yet. We need to kind of read this graph in two ways. On the one hand, yes, if you have a carousel, you have a box, you have arrows, and you have dots, that's not going to help, because most people will see only position 1. But there will be people who will be going through all the other ones. So if we encourage people enough to click on the second slice of the carousel and third, they will go very often through all of it. And that really heavily depends what kind of experience you're designing, right? Because if you're working with e-commerce, this will look very, very different. This is where people will go almost the entire carousel. This is the reason why Booking.com has sometimes 70 or 80 images in their carousel or image gallery, right? Because when you want to invest money into something, when you're interested in something, when you want to be sure that you're making a good decision, you need convincing arguments, you know, to convince yourself that this is a good deal. And you need to understand that, of course, you need to distinguish, of course, between, you know, carousels, image galleries, and all those things. But it's very important that we cannot just dismiss a carousel. Kind of showing pictures in a carousel-like style is actually quite important. In fact, when we look into e-commerce, we'll find out that it's probably going to look like this. We will have a kind of incremental decline or decay in viewing carousel slides, but it's never going to go from 100 to 1, right? So this is quite important. However, one thing is important as well. You know, obviously number 4, number 1, number 2, number 3, right? The first few slides are going to get a bit more attention than the others, because as people start using a carousel, they keep using it faster and faster. So over time, they might be skipping over some parts of the carousel, right? Now, what can we do then to make use of it? How can we make carousels better? Well, one way would be to, if you do want to stick to the dots, which in reality do not indicate anything but the progress, right? You can make these dots a little bit bigger, right? That's the minimum we can do, but this is not good enough. Another thing we could do, if you need an auto-rotating carousel, is to include a pause button, at least for the sake of accessibility, right? Because otherwise people will just abandon or scroll down, right? If it's just too frustrating and too annoying. So having a pause button is important as well. Or maybe, you know, like Amazon does it. Oh, it actually looks the same on mobile as well. right? Or maybe you could say, let's make it a little bit more usable. Why do we need to show the dots? We can actually choose to show progress in a slightly different way. So we have this horizontal bar at the bottom, right? And as you scroll left and right, you have the arrows, so you can jump predictably back and forth, right? And then you kind of indicate where the person currently is, right? Maybe we could do that. Or even better, let's add some labels instead of dots. In fact, I would say, if you can, always replace the dot with something actionable, something tangible, something like a label. So here we actually add a label right here, which actually disappears when you remove the mouse, right? But at least it gives me a bit more context of why I would even want to click on it. And I kind of like the fact that it's actually complemented with a slider, which indicates the progress, right? And also, as you hover over it, it actually shows the video of what you should be expecting to see, which I think is quite nice. And it looks almost the same on mobile. You just have this horizontal thing. But of course, vertical thing is, of course, if it's lengthy, if your labels are lengthy, it's probably going to be difficult to read, but you kind of get the idea, right? But we can take it to the next level as well. Because, for example, why not replace each label then with something like an icon or something that's actually just more, communicates a bit more? That's stripe.com. Where they highlight, jobs opportunities. They kind of have this little indicators indicating different parts, right? That doesn't have to be just a lifeless dot. It doesn't represent anything. It's a little bit more actionable. And again, I'm just showing this because sometimes you might be in a position where you might want to do that, right? Or take a photo, for example, like on Weber.com, right? It's definitely more actionable than just showing a dot as well. But then comes the magical question, which I spent approximately 1 week on. That was really frustrating to me. When I look at this kind of pattern where you have the arrows, right? You can swipe left and right, but at the same time you have arrows which allow you to swipe left and right or jump left and right. Now, coming back here, hold on. Where should these arrows be? Because there are 3 positions for them, right? We could place those arrows right here above the images, right? Or above the thumbnails, or right here in the center, kind of as overlay on top of the images, or below the images, right? Now, can you vote? Oh, no, not vote. Can you just type above, middle, or below, just so we're gonna get the idea of where you would like them to be? Well, we can go in conversations why. That's for later. That's interesting. Let's see. So I think I saw only 2 belows, most middle and above. And I don't know about you, but these questions bother me at night. This is why I cannot sleep sometimes, because I have to make the call, right? I have to recommend something when I'm working with the company. And so I'm not going to crush your dreams, but I do want to mention a few things. First, the best way, I think, to place the arrows, and I have tested it, is to place those arrows under the images, under the thumbnails, but mostly for mobile. Why, would you ask? Because if you happen to be on mobile, and if you have those arrows above or right on the images, you would always need to lift a finger to actually read the content of each thumbnail, right? If they are positioned under the image, you can click left and you can click right, and you don't have to move your finger at all. You can just keep clicking all the time while being focused on that thumbnail that you're actually reviewing. That seems to be performing way better than any other position that I've seen. So maybe we could consider that as an option, right? Or even better. Are you ready for this? This is going to change your life forever. I promise, I promise. It doesn't have to take the whole screen on mobile. If thumbnail takes the whole screen, then I would still put it on at the bottom, actually, right? But then here's the other part, which I think is genius. I would use it as a reference example for any kind of carousel. First, replace dots or remove dots or just ignore them or replace them with something like a stepper. It is a little bit different, but I absolutely love how it works. So on desktop, it's above the images, right? Then you go to mobile. Come on, keep going, right? So it's still above the images. And now, hopefully, keep going, right? And then at some point when you're on mobile, it's just where it needs to be, right? It's at the bottom on mobile, it's on top on desktop. That's exactly how it should be. That's exactly what seems to be performing best, at least in my experience, right? And in fact, you can make it funnier. You don't have to do it like this boring way, I guess. This is a really great implementation on ritual.com as well, when you kind of have these arrows integrated in a way, but also backgrounds kind of swipe and change. That's really beautiful. For me, this is a really well-designed carousel. Why not have that instead of everything that we're used to, right? So I think that this is really brilliant. Right. And in fact, of course, if you can't afford this and you want to go something a little bit more enterprise or corporate, there is a really great test that Amazon did a while back, and they tested plenty of options that this is what they went with. Again, basically just replacing dots, which do not provide any context, with something that provides context. In that case, it's label, some text next to it, thumbnail, right? And essentially just a tabbed menu now, which kind of acts like carousel. So it's auto-rotating, and it goes from all the sections, and it seems to be working well for them. And in fact, I would challenge you to test if removing dots performs better. Why? Well, this is what Amazon did, right? Instead of showing these dots, which people usually tend to click on, so you need to make them bigger, so that would need more space, right? As you load the page on mobile, on Amazon, you probably hopefully can see this little animation that's triggered to show that there is something in there, right? Or if you don't want to do an animation, can at least show a little bit of a clip saying that, oh, 80% of my screen is dedicated to this current thing that I want to show, and the other 20% indicates that there is something else, right? Is anybody with me at this point so far? Yes. So did we feel in love with carousels at the moment? Not yet. Would you change the Netflix UI? Frankly, I don't know. We can look into it a bit later. Would you say adding more pictures of thumbnails creates more cognitive noise? I don't know. I think it actually works really well when I was testing it on Booking.com. And again, I wasn't hired by Booking.com. I was just really curious if it works or not. People are clicking through like there is no tomorrow, right? They're going all the way in, because if they're interested in paying for something, a particular amount of money, well, they will just go in, right? So what are your thoughts on left-handed users? Frankly, when we look into a position of the arrows, right, it doesn't matter that much if it's kind of aligned to the right or aligned to the left, because in the end, it's going to be just focused on close enough position, right? However, you know, if you do have arrows in the right upper corner and somebody is left-handed, that's a problem, because they're definitely going to be blocking the content while watching it, right? And the photos are indeed very appealing. All right, well, but that's one part of the story, right? Let's move to the next one. And I also have the summary, but it will take just too much time to read all of that. You can also find it on the slides, right? Or feel free to take a screenshot. And next, right? Because there is another thing that I'm very excited about, and that's modals. Any fans of modals or pop-ups or anything like that? Oh, Vuka is a fan of modals. Nasa is not. Nasa, you don't like carousels either. That's a pattern here. Nicholas, you do like carousels as well. You see kind of two camps building up here. That's interesting. Well, let's take a look at modals. Nobody likes them, and most of the time for good reason, because they look like this. Who would like to be interrupted? Anybody? You are deep into your workflow and you're doing all the things that you need to do, and then all of a sudden, maybe when you send a bank transfer to somebody, you get this beautiful notification, please give us feedback, or anything of that kind. That's no fun. That's not great. In fact, you know, when you think about mobiles, they are very disruptive. And there has been a lot of research about modals and how they're horrible and how they're bad. And in fact, there are actually four or five particular things that I always try to bring up to my clients when we do consultancy, of things that they impact. One of the important things is that people who are disrupted, and it doesn't matter if it's a modal, I don't know, a screen turns off, connection is off, or anything like that, right? It always leads to the same problems. First, people forget the as left condition, right? So if you're typing a text or to send somebody or an email, right, and all of a sudden the machine shuts down, you'll be forgetting the state where you were, right? At least half of people will actually do that. Then you also forget to return to original task if you're multitasking. And obviously, you also slow down because you're being interrupted all the time, right? So that's not surprising. And that's coming from a study from 2014 by Fergus Craig. There was another one, which was done in 2006, which I tend to quote quite a bit, because people tend to use, when interrupted, people tend to need 3 to 27% more time to complete tasks and they have 2 times the increase in anxiety. And the important part, they commit 2 times the number of errors, right? I always try to argue with the number of errors, because errors can be very, very expensive. If you do not know how to resolve an error, how to fix it, you're going to abandon, right? Or you will never be able to proceed. So this is what I try to bring up to the table when we talk about those annoying models, right? And so they are really weird, those models, because in many ways, I feel like they're like cats, right? They're here and they kind of require attention no matter what you do, and you cannot do anything until you resolve the issue. That's disrespectful, a little bit, right? So, because when you see this, what can you do? You just need to act on it. There is no other way. Now, interestingly enough, there is actually more like a family of different models. It's not like there is a model. There are different kinds of models, and it depends on what interaction design is like. This is coming from Nielsen Norman Group. They published a beautiful article about all kinds of models and the user research they've done on that. And essentially, a model, as we usually call it, as we usually see it, is something that users can't, when users cannot interact with background content. A pop-up shows up, everything else is blocked. Like everything that's behind that model or behind that window is blocked. On the other hand, we have a light box where background is dimmed, right? But you could potentially scroll down. Sometimes you get that, right? Here you have also a non-light box where the background is not dimmed at all. And then you have a non-model, which is just a window which you can close, but you can still operate everything and click everything in the background. So depending on the situation, you might see one, series of the family or the other. Like here's an example of one of them. Can we guess what it is? Well, that's we cannot interact with the background, right? So this is really blocking us. But sometimes we need them, right? For example, when it's a new customer that you want to sign up in your enterprise application, it might be useful to actually have a model. Why? Because you don't want to miss the context of the background. There might be some important information in the background that you want to persist while using that model, right? At the same time, as you keep maybe doing other things like quick view, where you want to just briefly look into something, right? And then go back, right? And just enough to close the button, or just press escape key, and then off you go back to the same state. Because imagine if you have to scroll and you have infinite scroll, right? Kind of bringing people to a new page all the time would be devastating, because it would massively slow them down. Here, we probably want to show a model. Maybe it doesn't have to block the screen. We want to show it so they can close it and return back to the initial state, right? And then we can also have other things, like, for example, if it's critical actions, like deleting a customer, maybe you want to bring attention to that thing. Otherwise, you might be making a mistake, right? Or here's another one where you might want to have something that requires a little bit more complexity, have multiple steps. You want to upload file, check the file, confirm import, and so on and so forth. And in all these conversations about all these forms, we tend to forget that they have a lot of value, actually, because they, again, enable us to persist context, which can be very important. Unfortunately, most of the time, we don't use it in that way because we have newsletter pop-ups and, annoying ad pop-ups and so on. But in general, they are very relevant, right? And in fact, they are not all equal, right? So the ones that I showed right now are actually quite useful. They, again, do not allow us to do certain actions without interrupting current state. So people do not get lost, they do not forget. All the things that I mentioned do not happen. However, you also get slightly different kinds of models like this, right? And onboarding tours, or any kind of notification, or anything that really interrupts, something that's automatically initiated, not by the user, but by the system, is going to be disruptive like hell. Right. So we need to be very, very cautious about those things and show them only then when we know that people will value this interruption. Right. On the other hand, you might have something else like, oh, you're about to be signed out. You've been spending too much time on the page. Right. Those things are necessary, but maybe we don't need to block the entire page. So the intent that we have here is we want to indicate and inform the user very clearly that they need to do something to continue working on the page. Right. But maybe blocking everything is not necessary here. Maybe it could be just a little window that's bright enough, right, to highlight that there is something that has changed. And obviously, also for accessibility reasons, we would need to highlight it too, right? And so people don't exhibit much annoyance with self-initiated models when they click on a button and something happens. That's fine. But they get very frustrated with any kind of auto-triggered models, right? So, however, if a model helps users avoid critical mistakes, they find them acceptable. At least this is the experience that I had, right? So if you can avoid auto-triggered models, that's probably a good idea to do so. And so when we look into use cases, that's pretty much what I would say works and what doesn't work. First of all, we don't want to use them kind of blocking everything. I'm talking about models kind of blocking where the background is totally blocked. Right? We don't want to use them for newsletter box pop-ups, at least not initially when somebody enters the page. We might want to highlight it and integrate it better in the UI, right? Feature notifications, well, it needs to be a notification that can be dismissed, but not something that actually blocks the user. Onboarding models are difficult. Auto-triggered models are really bad most of the time. Whenever you show a model that is not related at all to the task that customer is doing, that's going to be a problem. If it's too complex and contains many pages or many error messages or many nested models, and I've seen this in enterprise as well, this is not going to work well. And anything that contains a lot of steps, like a wizard of sorts, will probably be difficult. And obviously, when somebody is focused on something, like again, maybe they want to send money from one account to the other, we don't want to show a model there. But for other things, if we know that users will value the disruption, if we know that it's specific for a task at hand, if we know it's something that they keep kind of using over and over, right? Maybe that's fine, right? In the same way, display important warnings. If you need immediate confirmation or user input, for example, you're booking a flight, the price has changed, you might want the user to be aware of that, to confirm a destructive action, to avoid errors, mistake, and just to verify and review complex input. For example, that's case, like the example from Gmail is a pretty good one. Seems like you forgot to attach a file. That makes sense. And I would argue that most of the time you will be performing better. And again, I'm talking not about user experience here, but about business. You'll be performing better if you do this instead of blocking the central screen. I would challenge you to test if you do use ad models or anything, newsletter pop-ups or anything of that kind, to allow people to interact with the rest of the screen while showing this newsletter if you absolutely need it. It might be performing better than if you block the entire screen, right? Another example of that is, Gmail, obviously, right? Where we can view or can compose a message while also looking at the other message at the same time. That's an example of a non-modal, right? It's just a window that happens to live on the page. Everybody still with me here? Or do you feel like, oh, it's totally mad, so there's no way. But one thing that's really important to understand here, that models per se are really complicated from a technical perspective. You have all these things that's called focus management, which might take a lot of time depending on how you build your application, right? Because when you use a model, you need to make sure that when somebody is using the tab key to navigate through the page and they open a model, you need to do the focus trapping so they actually keep focusing within that model. They need to be able to dismiss the model with the escape key, need to return focus to where they were before, and have to manage all of that. Especially if you have a complex application, this might be quite difficult, right? And in fact, there is a different kind of model that we usually just take for granted, and that's a tooltip. I do not like tooltips. I cannot stress enough how they should be banned forever. Can you guess why? Oh, Ellen is wondering why. Well, it's not because I don't like them. It's because they very often do more harm than help. We show a tooltip at the time when we want to communicate something to the user when they have a question, when they don't know what to do, when they may be locked out and things like that. But there are better ways of communicating it instead of a tooltip, which is really a model. Why? Well, for example, this is not helpful. You are about to type the password, and giving a hint as a model or a tooltip like this, not only blocking you from input, you have to type and then you have to open and reopen and reclose that bar or that model in order to be able to type anything. That's not great. That's not very useful. You cannot read a tooltip and type at the same time. And it doesn't matter, if it's a small one, short one, if you display it on the right and the left, on mobile, it causes tremendous harm. It's really, really painful at times, right? So what can we do better then? Well, what if instead, and I know that this sounds like a revolution here, but what if we show important information right in here, right under the label? That's probably a bit better and also a bit simpler. And also you don't have to do all the focus management stuff that I just describing previously. And I know. Sometimes we have situations where we have really complicated forms. We cannot afford showing all the hints for everything at all times. Well, there is another pattern for that. And that pattern is actually really useful. Use a little accordion, right? So contact us for help, for example. Well, just whenever somebody clicks on it, and could be a hint, right? Just show that text in line, right? And this is what it could look like, right? You have your password. It might be very complicated requirements that you have there. You don't need to show it as a tooltip, right? You just click on that tooltip on the on accordion, and off you go. You show that what you actually supposed to type, and you know what? It's right above the input field where I'm typing it. How convenient is that, right? So I'm not trying to, if you have a lot of tooltips and you've just been working on a project where you just integrated a ton of them, maybe it could be useful to reconsider. Just saying, because they have a lot of issues, just basic issues actually. Is it okay if all the forms and content then moves downwards? I mean, frankly, because people are clicking or tapping on the area which is, below the label, they expect the content to appear below it anyway. So they are not typing at the moment, right? Unless they are typing on desktop and then they're clicking away. That might be an issue if you have a very long description, but I didn't see it being a big problem, to be honest. Right, and also it's more accessible, obviously, right? Still, everybody still with me? I can go like this forever, like literally. By the way, I do have a model checklist, which has 58 items. You will find it in the slides as well. So these are all the things I ask when somebody starts working on a model. And usually when they see the checklist, they decide not to use it. All right, let's keep going. We have another beast coming in. We have infinite scroll. Any fans of infinite scroll here in the house? You keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and more items kick in, and you never hit the footer. Anybody? Oh, I don't get even one. Okay, not even one person likes them. It depends. Well, we have some. It depends. That's fine. That's fine. Well, in fact, actually, when we look into why we use infinite scroll, most of the time we use them to show information, to show more and more information, especially because we have a lot of information anyway. So they can be good for business. They can be damaging for UX. So normally there are a couple of options. Here is one of them, basically, right? You basically go to a product page or so, and as you keep going down, right, eventually you might be hitting the page 2, page 3, and so on, the pagination. That's basically the alternative to infinite scroll. But then you have this, right, where you literally go and go and go. And if you look on the scroll bar on the right, it just keeps going forever, because apparently there are many shoes on Nike, right? Until you see all of them, they will just keep going on, right? And then you have a different new pattern that has been showing up recently, which is crush field, for example, right? When you scroll down and you scroll and you keep scrolling and you keep scrolling, and because who doesn't like to scroll? You keep scrolling, and eventually you might be saw a little bit of a change in the scroll bar, so more items get loaded. And eventually, when you've seen 50 or so, they switch to the load more products pattern, right? So we have pagination, infinite scroll, load more. Can you vote by typing in the chat which one you prefer? Pagination, infinite scroll, load more. Again, the goal being we want to serve business, and we also want to help our customers. Poor load more, pagination, load more. Not even once infinite scroll. Okay, I love infinite scroll. No, I don't. That would be a really big, bold statement. I'm not going to say that. But there are ways of making infinite scroll work as well. First of all, let's take a look. First of all, if you actually ask customers what they prefer, what they like, what they don't like, they will tell you that they hate all of these options. All these 3 options are bad for different reasons. First, when we look into pagination, usually people think that they are just slow. You have to wait, you have to click on page 2, and then you go to page 2 and jump to the top of the page, and you have the header navigation, and you scroll down. And then you do this over and over and over and over again, right? Especially on mobile, when you might have a very, just a lot of data coming in, it might just feel slow. But you have some really cool things. Like, for example, you can send a link to yourself to continue navigating later. So you can start on mobile, and then you can continue on desktop, which is something that you cannot do with infinite scroll most of the time. Technically, you could do that, but most of the time, most implementations don't have that. So users browse significantly less. That's important to understand here. And they often feel slowed down. But if this is your goal, it's going to work. Users spend more time on the first page and use filters and sorting more, right? If that's your goal and you maybe don't have hundreds of products like Nike does, maybe pagination is the best option for you, right? Infinite scroll, on the other hand, is the most overwhelming one. Users often dive into this exploration mode. They see a lot of products, but they very often don't go into detail. They don't go into all the fine intricacies of every product. Some of them will be opening a few tabs, but it's really unlikely to see like 20 or 40 tabs open, right? People want to explore everything to see what they've got first. And very often they just get totally out of control and they feel like they don't know where they were. They cannot continue scrolling or continue exploring these products. And he also, of course, has a footer issue. Still, you know, sometimes I can see this working really well. So if you do want to use an infinite scroll, at least one issue is fixed, the footer issue, because you can use a simple pattern that I found on Damakan, which is a Malaysian food delivery service. Don't ask me how I got there. I have no idea, really. So what they do is they kind of show this floating footer at the bottom. So it's a scrolling pattern, scrolling bar. So as you scroll, more and more and more and more and more items show up, right? But at every point of time, you can hit the footer if you need to. That's great. So we don't have the footer issue. Still, you know, you might be very cautious about showing too many items because people will drop off. And finally, we have the load more. What are we going with load more pattern? Well, as it turns out, it works best in terms of conversion. I'm not sure if it works best in terms of UX. I don't see many people being very excited or loving it too much, but it seems to be working best for businesses. If people have control, everything that they need can be on the same page, but they don't have to. And also, that's important, once you hit the load more button, you can change the URL, right? And so add a little bit of space between the first part and the second part, right? What you've just loaded. So people feel like they're navigating through the parts of the list, like they're going through pages, although in reality, just one big list, right? And they can send links to themselves. And that's one thing that I would highly recommend you to do. If you do use a load more pattern, I challenge you to add a link to share, or like a share link right next or probably right under the load more button or right above it. Depends on, you know, where you want to, how it's designed. So people can actually send the link to themselves and continue browsing later. That's very, very useful as well, right? And you know what people also like? They like to have predictable interfaces, which is not common, usually not the case. For example, if we go to IKEA and we just keep going and keep scrolling, you know, eventually we have this mode where we have to start filtering or sorting because there are just too many products. And we'll be sorting by price, by customer rating, by other things. So filtering is clear. We select what is important to us, but, you know, sorting is actually quite important as well. So what if we make sorting a bit more useful? There is a prototype that Baymart Institute, it's basically just a usability research company from Denmark, great friends of mine. They did a little test. What if we do this, right? Imagine you're sorting by something, by price, by review, by anything really, and you just highlight with loading like infinite scroll or even load more button, right, where you are. So if you're sorting by price, you can jump immediately to $210. That's infinitely more useful than just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling forever, right? So why don't we do that? The same could be for reviews. I want to jump to 4.7. Well, we have then 4.5, 4.6, 4.7, and you keep going. That's very, very useful. Unfortunately, have you ever seen it anywhere? That's almost magical. It really is. I wish it was everywhere. I really do. The same could be applied to other patterns as well. You want to load more pattern, you can do that too. And also for pagination, why don't we have this, right? So if we have, let's say, you know, these pages, why don't we indicate some meta information about what kind of pricing we have here? That, of course, assumes that somebody has started sorting by something, right? That's magical. That's really, really useful. On mobile, to do the same thing, right? You can have a little swiper, even maybe a carousel. You can jump between all the different parts predictably. That's really, really useful, right? So I highly encourage you to try that, right? Okay, still with me, everyone? Okay, which kind is better for accessibility? Basically, what you would need to do for accessibility is for both situations, for pagination and for infinite scroll, we would need to have a label for it so people can jump to it if they're using a keyboard, let's say, and then navigate through it. So it would be just an unordered list, I guess, where you would jump to, and it needs to be docked and spread because you need to calculate the space across the scroll bar, right? Fully accessible, but no problems there. You just need to help people navigate there. So you need to provide some area navigation landmarks, and that's it, right? Okay, Daphne and Avi, how much time do I have left? I can go like this forever. You know me.
I think we have another 20 minutes, 25
20
minutes.
minutes. Yes, excellent. 20. I was thinking 10. Now I have 20. This is good. By the way, dear friends, if you'd like to see more insights like this, I will have some advertising for the upcoming Forms workshop, which will dive into more detail. All right, next, validation, and specifically inline validation. Any fans of inline validation in the house? Like, you know, when you start typing and then it gets, hey, you made a mistake. You need to fix the mistake. Yeah, so we have a few fans. Let me see if I can crush your dreams as well. Well, we have three kinds of validation on the web, right? We have basically premature validation. Imagine you have a beautiful form in front of you. It's just loaded. And the moment you start typing in the field, it tells you you're wrong. You haven't even had a chance to type in anything. It tells you you are wrong. How friendly is that, right? Then you have immediate validation. That's just premature. That's too early. Somebody just focused on the input field, giving them an error is just not cool, right? Then we have immediate validation. As a user types, sometimes we can have a threshold, and after a particular number of characters, we start validating. It's very difficult to get right. It requires quite a bit of logic. You need to do that for every single input field. It can be quite frustrating and annoying, especially because it's really hard to get it right. And then you get late validation when somebody leaves the input field, right? Then we're telling them, no, go back, you made a mistake, right? So let me ask you, which one do you prefer? Premature, immediate, or late? We have immediate or late. Well, definitely not premature, right? It depends is always the right answer, right? So we have late, a lot of lates, a lot of immediates. Well, let's take a look. Well, if we look at some examples, most of the time, all these examples are just really, really sad. So this is one of them. You start typing your email address, right? And again, I always do this. I always record a video of a user using an application, and then I go in slow motion, like really frame by frame, trying to see exactly what happened in the interface. It gives you much more insight than a heat map. At least this is at least my experience. When I actually get to see people struggling, and it's not like I enjoy that, but it's really useful to get some very useful insights, right? So people have started typing here, right? And so I'm typing wrong email, and then I have two @ symbols. No validation kicking in yet, right? That's just telling me, okay, keep going, basically, right? Eventually, I keep going, gives me even a little helper here. So I type in G and tells me gmail.com autocomplete, right? Okay, can you see? I think you can see the screen, right? So I made a mistake already. It doesn't tell me that I made a mistake because it hopes, I guess, that I will be able to recover from it, right? Okay, and then I go to the next input field. It tells me it's wrong. Please type in your correct email address. I'm in first name now because I'm using a tab key. So what do? I don't like mistakes. I want to correct a mistake, so I go back, right? So hold on, let's go. So no. So I go back, and then I'm being validated, or I'm being penalized twice. That's not fair. I didn't even have a chance to type in the first name. And that happens when you combine different kinds of validation: late validation, immediate validation, and potentially, at this particular case, at least premature validation. That's really, really frustrating. I didn't make any big mistake here yet, but it looks like I did two mistakes already, although that's not quite true. So what can we do here with this kind of validations? Well, we can make things a bit better. This just requires quite a bit of work. So because what I see companies doing is, if we want to have inline validation, well, we need to set a threshold of characters for every single input. We start validating only if that threshold is reached, right? If there is an error, like we saw with two @ symbols, we show it immediately as we detect it, right? Which means we need to test all the time as somebody is typing, right? We show success, the green checkbox, only if the user has moved to the next input field. If we edit a field that was valid before, then we validate after data entry. So imagine you have an input field it was valid, somebody clicks on the input field to change it, right? And it becomes invalid. When do we validate? When do we show it? Well, they might be making some changes in the structure of the content and so on. So we want to validate once they have left that input field. And if we edit a field that was invalid, hopefully they're fixing the mistake, we want to validate immediately during data entry. So if there was two at symbols in the email and they remove one, we probably don't want to wait until they hit kind of move to the next input field. We validate immediately, right? Does that make sense? Right. So, however, you can also make it way more complicated, or maybe actually easier, depends on how you see it, by not validating inline. How about that? What if we validate only on submit button? How are we feeling about that? Anybody? No inline validation at all, just submit button. When you click on the submit button or register button or whatever, only then you get to see the errors. Otherwise, we do not validate. Is it a bit late, says Alan? Could be. However, it's a bit more predictable. When I was testing it, actually, I was expecting that this is not going to work well. But what I learned is if you combine positive inline validation, mostly positive validation, right, with validating on submit, that seems to be working fine. And at the same time, if you know that somebody has made a mistake, really made a mistake, like where you have two at symbols or so, then it's probably a good idea to remind them about that right away. It's a bit tricky, but I see some people saying, well, maybe we should actually just drop inline validation altogether. And it could look like this. So here's how it works then, right? Oh, hold on, I just jumped somewhere else. This is not where I want it to be. Wait. No, here we go. I think it was supposed to be a video, but it doesn't play. Well, too bad, right? But the idea is, well, you have your label, you have your input fields, and you kind of have this intermediate state, maybe the yellow, right? And then as you actually click on register, only then you actually show the mistakes. Again, I would challenge you to at least test how your UI would perform if you do not have any inline validation at all. It might be at least as good, it might be better. Chances are high you will need to have some positive inline validation. At least this is what my experience was, right? This would make the experience, the interface, much calmer, right? Compared to what we used to have previously. And you can make things really, really complicated again, because you will end up with a situation when validation isn't bulletproof. Because you will have, like, some of you might have been in this situation as well. You may be typing your address and you know that the address is correct, your shipping address, let's say. But the interface tells you, no, you're wrong. But you're right. You know you're right because this is your address. This is where you live. You've been living for the last years, right? You know that there are packages delivered to your address. So this is right. But the interface tells you, no, this is wrong. This is 100% abandonment right there because you will not be able to continue at all. This is it. You're locked out. And this is where you will lose some people, right? And so this happens quite a bit, actually, for things that are relatively complicated, like shipping addresses, just because maybe they have an old database, all right, that does not have your building, which was built maybe 5 years ago, right? And so it's easier when you have something like character count, when you have something like VET validation, maybe magic sign-in, SMS code, things like that. But you could do the same thing with the validate button too. You don't need to have inline validation there. A validate button could work perfectly well too, right? So these are all the cases that I could spot in usability research when validation fails, right? And that's too much for me, right? That's too fragile for me. Obviously, we have aggressive validators for address, phone numbers, or email. Sometimes services require a non-Gmail email address, but I'm using my Gmail as primary email address, so I'm locked out, right? Sometimes input is optional, but the empty strings do not pass validation for some reason. Sometimes you have countries with non-conforming or non-standardized TIN or VAT tax numbers. Sometimes you have ad blockers blocking the scripts that actually validate content. Sometimes you have tracking blockers blocking a location input prompt at all, and you're enforced to kind of, the interface wants you to give permission, but you cannot because you're being blocked, right? When the user doesn't have all the data, they cannot continue, you cannot save for later, right? And then you have browser extensions which block some parts of the UI as well. And it's really difficult. It's like you really need to make sure that your UI is so reliable to support all of those cases. And I'd rather go with a simpler path, if you ask me, right? So this is why when it comes to inline validation, maybe not, right? Okay, just saying. I don't want to crush your dreams still. I still have one more dream to crush. We'll get there. All right, the final one, the king or the queen of them all, disabled submit buttons. Do I have any fans of disabled buttons in the house? Not many. Avoid. Oh, I have Christian. Christian is a fan or friend. Pierre Baptiste is as well. Radu too. Okay, a few people. Well, let's see if I can change your mind here. Well, welcome to the world of disabled buttons. The buttons which are hiding away until we actually tapped in everything correctly in the form, and only then they make their final appearance. And there is a good reason for that, because we obviously want the things to be correct, and all the input that comes through the page needs to be validated, and hopefully they will, and then we enable the button. The problem is, very much like with inline validation, the enabling of a disabled submit button really requires a fully functional, 100% functional, and 100% reliable inline validation, right? I mean, if your inline validation doesn't work, even in 1% of the cases, this button will never come to life and people will be locked out forever, right? That's important. So I was trying to find, because I was working with the company, like, okay, hello, by the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Vitaly. After an hour, he says. And like 50% of my time is spent on the magazine that we're running, publishing articles about UX, front-end design, and so on. And the other 50% I spent in enterprise mostly when I'm dealing with users, customers, and businesses who try to improve their conversion or try to improve their overall design. And so this very often becomes a problem. And I was working with a company, an insurance, Belgian insurance company. They could not afford removing infrastructure, changing the front-end architecture altogether to avoid disabled submit buttons. Or I was not able to convince them. That could also be an option. So in that particular case, and this is not the UI from there, right? But in that particular case, this was not an option. So I started thinking and looking into disabled buttons, right? Or disabled states, because what does this represent? So when I see this on Walmart, right, I'm clicking on a filter somewhere and everything is disabled. It's in many ways resembles a modal, right? Because I cannot do anything here. I need to sit and wait until something gets back to life, right? And it's not always like that, because sometimes, depending on what kind of interface you're using, like on Coolblue, which is a big retailer from Netherlands, right? When you're using the filters, the sidebar with all the filters is available, right? But this view, the product list, is disabled, right? So potentially, if I wanted, I could click through all the different filters, and then they would be refreshing the screen multiple times. That's maybe a little bit better than just disabling everything. But then sometimes you also get something slightly different. Like, for example, you just need some data from the server. This is WISE, or previously known as TransferWise. And then you have, you need to be able to check or what your account's income is. So they're going to need some time. So they show this little skeleton screen, very much like Facebook does when they show these little bars they're moving, right? And just, this is also kind of a disabled state, but nothing is really blocked. I can really click anywhere on the screen except from that product list, which is not available to me yet. But sometimes you definitely want to disable. Like, for example, very much like with the model, you definitely want to disable the submit button or continue button or anything when you send money to somebody, right? You don't want to make a mistake there. So the more you want to avoid making mistakes or critical mistakes that might be even irreversible, like deleting something, you probably want to disable the button, right? Because otherwise you'll be making a critical mistake there, right? So when it comes to the disabled state, what it is really is an indicator that something is wrong. With disabled buttons, however, if only the buttons are disabled, there is no problem per se. It's not like the problem by default. Users have more confidence that there is a problem that's directly related to the input, right? Not necessarily to the entire UI. So they don't kind of keep refreshing, hoping that this button is going to appear, right? No, they understand that this is not working yet for some reason. So when we look at the typical examples of that, this is what it usually looks like. Imagine you want to book a trip to go from one place to another, to the next, and then you have these options. This is a service from Sweden, and then you have different pricing options for the second class and first class. And so if you want to make to book a ticket, obviously you will be probably making a decision of which one you're going to take, tapping on this area, on this button, right? And then this button at the bottom will come to life, as it does, right? Now, however, when I looked into it and I thought, is it a problem or is it okay? Can you tell me, is it okay or is it a problem? Please write okay in the chat if you find this perfectly fine, or problem if it is a problem for you. Ah, here we go. Alice says not accessible. That's one of the problems. Can people think that this is not disabled? That will depend on the studies that we run, of course, right? User told us once that the disabled button was confusing and suggested a tooltip saying, please enter all required fields. Okay, we'll get to it in a moment. Contrast, right? There are actually a couple of problems here. One of them is when people encounter a disabled button, the first thing they do is slow down. Now, very often you don't want people to slow down massively, right? Because if they typed in everything and the button is slowed down, is disabled, they have no idea where to go. They don't know where to start. They don't know where to look for the fix, right? So what do? They slow down, they look around, and they go field by field. First of all, if there are error messages, they will try to search for error messages. If there are no error messages, they will just go field by field, sometimes doing kind of the usual suspects, where maybe sometimes people know that, you know, if you're being asked for a phone number and you typed in empty spaces, maybe this is the reason why it doesn't work. So they will remove that. Maybe the address isn't quite right. So you will try to maybe write, you know, in German, it's Straße or street, right? So you'll be sometimes writing with a full stop and sometimes not. So you'll be trying this, kind of literally playing this mind game, because you're literally left out of the woods, trying to figure out what is the problem. This was my problem with WeTransfer.com. I do apologize if you're working for WeTransfer.com, but that's just what happened to me literally like, what, 2 months ago? There is no way for me to proceed. There is a button saying, I guess it's a button saying add your files. There is a button at the bottom saying transfer, which is disabled, right? So what do? I click everywhere I can, nothing happens. So what next? The only thing I can do now is literally to close it or try to refresh it. This is it. This is the only thing I can do. So at some point you might want to try to, I don't know, just go ahead and try to push it somehow or upload, but that doesn't work either. So what do? There is nothing you can do here, right? So the typical problem with those buttons is they don't explain what's a problem, right? They don't explain what is wrong and how to fix it. They're also not focusable, they're hard to read, and they're grayed out, right? Which makes it very difficult to perceive what is actually going on there. With enabled buttons, we can at least have a chance to highlight the errors or point people to the direction of how to fix those errors, right? And again, I'm not saying that we should dismiss them altogether. For interfaces like this, where we want to avoid critical mistakes, we want to highlight that the button will be disabled. For example, when you click on convert, to convert from one currency to another, I know, Avi, just 2 more minutes, to convert from one currency to another, right? Well, obviously, when somebody clicked convert, we don't want them to double click, because they might end up with double conversion. We don't want that. So that's where we definitely want to disable. Or when somebody adds an item to the cart, we probably want to disable as well, right? And when it comes to something like double bookings or wrong purchases, or when people need to validate a magic sign-in code, you know, that's fine. But we can also make things a bit better. So, for example, one thing we could do is to say, hey, maybe we can hover, show as a tooltip at this point, what is a problem by people hovering over add to cart, which is disabled. That's a bit more useful. At least it indicates what the problem is, right? It could also be fully accessible.
Heading level 1, inclusive disabled buttons available. Demo free /3. Disabled button using ARIA disabled attributes and tooltip. Number of tickets required invalid data. Edit text 0. Add to cart. Dimmed button. Add between 1 and 9 tickets. You are currently on a button inside of a frame. This item is dimmed. To exit this web area, press Control Option Shift. Link.
So if you want to create an inclusive, accessible, disabled button, that's also possible, right? It's just, you know, it's probably slightly more difficult than it would be just by disabling the button, right? But you could also do a bit more. Maybe it would be even easier, right? Just do not disable a button. That might be easier, right? And so when you click on that button, you could actually indicate what the problem is, right? As a tooltip, as a hint, or anything like that. Or you can do it slightly differently. That's what we tried. What if we show the errors, right? Or kind of a summary, a brief summary of the errors right below or right above the button. At this point, I think it would probably be better to show it above the button, because if you happen to be on mobile and the submit button is at the bottom of the screen, then, you know, showing it at the top might be a little bit better, right? Because you will be able to always see it, but you can take it to the next level too. Because if I look here, right, and it does get enabled. What if on that disabled button at the bottom right, we add a bit of text, like, for example, to avoid people being locked out. Can't proceed? Please choose your journey first. You tap on the link, you jump right to the area where you need to choose your journey, right? That might be a bit more obvious than just disabling a button. Or can't proceed? Let us know. We'll email you shortly. What happens now, when you click and let us know, it will ask you for the email address. So the customer support has at least a chance to get back to that customer and sell them something, right? That's something I've never seen in my life. And we tested it, it worked really well. We were able to bring down the abandonment rate from 1.4% to 0.6% just by doing that, just by adding some text copy. That's incredible. That's really, really good, right? And then I keep going, and maybe we could do something like this. I mean, I know that many of you will disagree, but what if we do this? Continue with errors. There seem to be errors in your input, but if you're sure, please proceed. So if you typed in your address, and that seems to be too weird for the aggressive validator, maybe allow people to proceed with this, despite the fact that the validator doesn't pass it through. How about that? Maybe it should be sending not necessarily all the data to the server, but maybe instead it could be sending the data to the customer support again. But again, this gives a really good way out. So you will remove the abandonment rate to 0, right? Because people have at least a chance to fix it or to proceed. You will potentially, of course, end up with errors in your database. That's something to keep in mind, right? But that's really, really powerful because you end up with really reducing the abandonment rate to the minimum almost, right? So providing a way out is, I think, a very, very important idea in general. And then final thing, Avi, you will kill me now, but just one final thing that I want to highlight here is a very simple level of transparency. This is what I learned people really appreciate. And then we can go to the question, so don't worry. People appreciate transparency. They really do. So what my work has been really is trying to make things as obvious as possible. You go to a product page, maybe like this, right? And you see a lot of stuff that's being kind of thrown at you, and you maybe want to buy this Roomba, right? And then it costs $400. But if you're buying from Israel, how the hell do you know how much you actually end up paying? There are currency exchange that might need to be considered. There's plenty of things that might need to be considered. So what my goal has been is, what if we make it as transparent as possible? For example, if you're buying these joggers things, right? It costs 14 pounds, but how much would you actually pay if you happen to be from Israel, right? So maybe we could do this. Let's show delivery and returns, next day collection, order before 2 p.m., free. That's a bit better, right? Maybe we could say estimated shipping costs, let's say for Dublin, Ireland, $3.95, right? And then maybe people will want to change it. So let's make it Dublin IR, maybe add some information, maybe as a tooltip as well, right? And then we want to do the same for estimated taxes and fees. Probably don't need to write Dublin IR there. We just say home delivery 1 or 2 days, but maybe it's a bit better if we say 1-2 working days. And maybe it's even a bit better if it's a link, right, telling you where, so you can click on it and get information when it's going to be delivered, or you just display that information immediately, arriving by July 17th, right? Or maybe even better, let's allow people to change the location as well. Maybe they're booking from a different location, maybe they're using a VPN, right? Maybe also with some hint, so they know how the taxes are calculated, right? Or maybe allow them to calculate taxes on their own, right? Maybe with a little popover that's going to show up there, right? And then you keep going and going and going and refine, and then you just add all the information that people care about. The first thing I do when I go to work on a project like that is I'm going to 2 places: customer support, because they know what people's pains are, right? And also backlog, kind of the most popular, the most requested features. And I try to surface those features, surface this information in a very compact way. It's not like I'm, a Sketch person or Figma person or Photoshop person or anything, but it's all about clarity and transparency, right? And so all these things, like even free returns to store, free easy returns to store, free easy returns to store 30 days, or maybe like this, or maybe like that. And this is what we test, right? And the same goes for, payment methods. And this has been kind of my journey for the last, I don't know what, couple of years now, right? Now, there are plenty of things we could do, but I do want to finish up just by saying there are things that people don't like, and there are things that people absolutely love. And what people love is actually quite predictable. People love when things are fast and accessible, when you can read what is written on the screen, when the checkboxes and radio buttons are large, where input boxes look like input boxes and not material design. Sorry about that. I have feelings about material design as well. When you have focus on active states, it freezed on me. When you have simple password requirements, predictable tabbing, helpful error messages, good autocomplete, where you hit refresh and your data is persisted, when the dropdown opens on tap and click, where you have easy way to undo your mistakes or edits or cancel things, have a predictable back button where you can snooze notifications or say, please remind me later. Also little things like you imagine you have a subscription plan for something, you actually want to keep it, but you don't need it for the next couple of months. Allow people to pause it. And finally, transparent pricing, right? So that's what we can do to make things a little bit better on the web. So to wrap up, right, I always show this little video and I will not be able to stop me. This is the story of the web in like 50 seconds. The things are not satisfying, right? Not satisfactory, I would say, but we can make things way better. So this is the story of our lives in design on the web in 2021. That's for us designers here. Huge thanks to Parallel Studio for the video, but no worries, no worries. It was sad, but it gets better because we have cats and more cats. And Meow, and thank you for your attention. And I'm looking forward to your questions. Let's make the web a little bit better. Please don't cry. It will be fine, I'm sure.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you, Vitaly.
Of course, my pleasure, Avi. Thanks everyone for coming as well. Questions? Do we have any questions?
Yeah, unshare your screen so we can see everyone.
Oh, sure.
Let's. If someone has a question, a comment, wants to add to it, or has a problem that he wants to solve, let's try to do it together.
Now, let me see if I can undock the screen so I can see the chat here as well.
So, Edith, unmute yourself. Oh, no, it was a clap. Okay, if you want to raise your hand. Okay, Ellen, I can see you. So, unmute yourself, I guess. No? Okay, let me see. Okay, now.
Now I'm unmuted. Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Ellen.
Hi, Vitaly, and hi, Avi. Thank you for the lecture. And I want to ask like a classical question of the forms, the contact form. Like after I'm coming as a product manager in the past UX designer, but I'm really, when I'm defining the product, I'm thinking what people do need in this contact form. Usually it seems to me too rough, this email, who are you, like name, email, and your text. It looks dry, it seems like we don't care. I see a lot of options that are adding screenshots, adding some tables of what kind of like, so we on our side will be able to make even more use of this information to know what happened and in our databases. But what do your suggestions and what do you feel nice and modern to do that users really like and would love to share?
Perfect. Very good question. Thank you so much, Alan. Well, first of all, it probably depends heavily on what kind of size you're talking about. So if it's enterprise, there are certain things you cannot do. If it's more like an agency or so, there are certainly some things you can do. I think in general, when it comes to the form, I think one of the common things is to combine the first name and last name as one. So just name, right? That's actually still not common, but it should be probably, especially for this kind of environment where you just want people to reach out to you, right? For complex forms, I think one thing that is often getting forgotten is the the layout of the form, not in terms of one column or two columns, we're kind of way through that already, but more about the order of questions asked. Because when we think about what people care about most, maybe the first thing that we should be asking, for example, in the contact form, should not be email and should not be first name or last name, but maybe the text area where they can type, right? Because this is why they're there. And then, you know, everything else will come in later. And so that would be the other thing. But in general, I'm very glad that you asked this question, because I think you can do something else in the form. So sorry, Avi, I have to hijack you again. I have to share the screen and show just a few more things. I think I had it somewhere. Hold on. While I'm answering here, one thing that actually works really well is to give people something that they're not expecting. And that would be, for example, something like a radio button. Why not give them a radio button that they can click? Let me show you an example of that. I saw that and I thought it could be everywhere. What about giving people something like this? Like imagine you have maybe some sort of checkbox for subscribe to your updates or be notified when you get a reply, and give them a little bit of surprise, like this, right? So maybe they will have to tap 2 times or 3 times. I mean, again, it's not going to be for everybody. It doesn't have to be like this, obviously. You can do whatever you prefer, but make them remember you in a way. I mean, especially for quite boring forms like Contact Us, right?
You're talking about gimmicks.
Yeah, like no, it's just something that has your personality in it. It doesn't have to be like a game that's so frustrating and annoying, but you kind of get the idea of what we could do potentially, right?
Like the smiling monkey of the MailChimp when you're entering.
Yeah,
the
yes, just
or
animation
chat
maybe, or this.
Yeah.
This is probably my favorite example. You probably have seen, all of you have seen this before, but that will people remember you. That could also be a contact form, right? So this is incredible. I mean, I remember when I was typing for the first time, I wanted to type so long. It was like, I want to just keep typing and retyping. It's just perfect in every possible way.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you for the wonderful question.
Thank you.
Gal,
Thank you very much.
You're up next, Ellen. Nice to see you again.
Back from Hunter.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hi, I have a question regarding forms. So for example, if I have 3 sections of radio button and one folded them into a drop down, what do you think about it? For example, in this case, into a drop down, which is a picker that combine 3 different subjects.
Right. So that would probably heavily depend on what kind of selection the radio buttons do. In general, I would say, I mean, I see one thing happening quite a bit, and that's where we, as designers, misuse or use radio buttons instead of segmented control. I think in general, if we can, I would probably, when it comes to radio buttons, especially when they live inside of a widget or so, I would just make them buttony, like make them buttons, look like buttons, so they actually are easy to tap and click. In general, though, if it's related to the thing that the people are opening, like within the widget or within the date picker or whatever it is that they have, that's fine. I mean, you can see this quite a bit when you come to booking a place in a restaurant, let's say, right? And so you have the calendar, but on the top of that calendar, you see today, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, things like that. This works, right? It could also be just a text link potentially, right? But that works. The thing that people do sometimes, though, is if those issues or those options, like these 3 things that you were talking about, if they're very important, we don't want to hide them behind a calendar widget, but instead, if there is a calendar icon next to the input field, maybe you want to highlight these 3 options right under that input field or above it. You know, the more important they are, the less we want to hide them, the more we want to surface them. That goes the same way for navigation. So if you have very important navigation items like your CTAs, right? You probably don't want them behind a hamburger icon. We want them to be exposed no matter what, all the time. But there is way more that we will be covering in the forums workshop, I heard, Avi.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you. It's very hard to explain it when it's not visual.
Thanks,
but thank you, Gal, for the question. Edith, you're up.
regarding
Yes.
logging. I mean, I think it's a chapter in your.
Very hard to hear you. Speak into the microphone, please.
Okay, sorry. My question is regarding logging. I think it can be a chapter in the frustrating design patterns. And what can you add and say about this? I mean, I jumped into some login forms. I have to, I don't know, application for works and stuff like that. That they made me sign up and fill up forms with my zip code and stuff like that. So, what is your opinion?
Yes, that's a very good point. I do have to start sharing the screen because I do have a section, indeed, a chapter on forms, on login, authentication and everything. Just to be very brief here, essentially there are a few problems that appear all the time. One problem that is often forgotten, I think, going through all of the slides will take a bit of time. One thing that often gets forgotten is that password recovery is extremely expensive. It's the most expensive thing you can do in the UI. Because when people start recovering password, there is a 60% chance, and this is a very high chance. This is a case study that was done by Etsy.com a couple of years ago. 60% of people who start recovering password never recover it, right? This is very expensive. So password recovery, or like the password link, right? Even if it's magic link or whatever, is often quite dangerous. So if you can leave people through, let's say like doing a guest checkout or so, that's probably going to be better. Then for the login part, I mean, the most important part is, and that's again, something just to keep in mind, is to ask yourself, how do you display the login information? For example, here on Smashing, I don't know if you can see it. Let me show it maybe larger. One thing that was very important to us was to avoid password recovery and avoid logging in form as much as possible for two reasons, obvious reasons, and that would be conversion, right? If you would include something like a password link right here, people will try to recover the password and a percentage of them will be leaving. If you have a login link which is visible, right, like really like bold and blue and red or striking, you will have people trying to log in. So what if we actually prioritize the guest checkout, right? And we decided to test. And so one thing that we did, and not everybody can do that, but in our case, a small company, we can probably afford that. We said, what if, let's say somebody who already checked out once, and as you can see, we don't have an option to choose guest checkout. This is a default, right? The guest checkout is the default. You can't choose to, log in. I mean, you have a login link at the top, but it's a little bit hidden, right? And the reason is this: if you already have, bought a book, let's say once, and you go through the checkout process again, and you type in the email address that we know already exists in the database because you bought with that email in the past, right? We are not letting you go through the login. So we're not saying, hey, you need to type in the password and log in. We allow you to buy the book as a guest with the same email address. So as you checked out entirely, right, you will get that book in your login if you ever log in, right? But if you don't, you can download it and you can actually get the book delivered to your footsteps, briefly, right, soon. But it's important that we don't drive people there. So in general, for login, I would say that normally magic sign-in is important. However, for things like this, when you want people to pay you money, you probably don't want to make it too noticeable, right? And of course, if you need authentication for security reasons, then you probably will have to drive through this two-factor authentication or magical sign-in. That's going to be this is a state of art. This is good security. This is also pretty decent usability, right? And also one more thing I want to mention about this: the timing is extremely important. It's important when we ask for particular things, like for example, email. Normally, when we come to forms like this, we see email and then verify your email or confirm your email, like the second input field. Some of you might have seen this before, right? And that's really weird and dangerous because people just happen to be on autopilot at this point when they're filling in. So what we decided to test, and that worked really well as well, is to ask ourselves, when do people filling in the form care most about the correctness of the email input? When do they care, right? And that happened to be just before they buy something when they pay for something, and just after they bought something, right? So just before they buy something, there is a little thing that will say your order confirmation will be sent to this email address, please verify, or you can also edit it, right? And also once they click the finish checkout, there is a way for them to send confirmation to another email, because this confirmation page is very, very important as well. So it's all about finding the right time to ask the right question, I think. And this is, and I mean, I'm not trying to say that you always know better, but just because I spend so much time with people and experiencing their pain, there are certain things that we need to challenge, right? Actually asking for email, verify email is just ridiculous because people copy paste. It's not like only us copy pasting, people copy paste the email address. So what's the point? Right?
No, you can block it, but yeah.
Yeah, you can block it, right? This creates a
It's
wonderful
annoying.
user experience.
Yeah. It's annoying.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope it answers your question. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
But...
In terms of, I really mostly in terms of password, because it's really annoying, you know, into 2021 to just to remember all those passwords, and there are so many different options to log in, and sometimes you don't have to log in. I mean, if I'm just buying this book, when I want to leave, just let me buy it and go. I mean, I'll give you my email, I give you my credit card, everything, and my shipment address, but I don't want to have an account.
Yeah, that brings me to one final note, and sorry everybody for waiting, and sorry Avi for hijacking it again. Just to be more specific about that particular thing, that has been resolved 15 years ago by Amazon, actually.
Yeah.
If we look into how Amazon is working, I don't remember.
The $300 million button.
Yes, yeah. I don't remember when I actually typed in my password in Amazon, because the idea there is this. Once you create an account for the very first time, they keep these cookies for what, 20 years? 20 years, they're not going to ask you to retype or reconfirm your password. And the way it works is, and this is a quote from that talk by Jared Spool about $300 million button, right? As long as you ship items to the same address that you have already used and authorized on a machine that you've already authorized on once, you don't have to enter your password for the next 20 years. That's a nice experience. And that's a pretty safe experience, because we're kind of assuming that if you're buying with the same credit card and you're shipping to the same address on the machine where you already have the cookies, why ask for password anyway? Like at all, ever, right? Maybe not everybody can afford that. Maybe not every bank can afford doing that, right? But maybe in some scenarios, that's perfectly safe and secure.
That's right.
Okay, we have time for last question, and then we're going to go with the networking session to meet new people. So stay tuned for that if anyone can. Christian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I had a question about cookie preferences. When you want to manage your preferences, there are quite a few different ways to deal with that. Do you have any best practices there?
Yes, let me just open another deck. Just a second. I have prepared as well. I have a chapter on that too. Just a moment. So when it comes to privacy patterns, right, there are also a couple of things that it's not like all these questions are staged, by the way. I didn't know everybody who has asked the questions, but I do have the examples here. One very good example of that is Xing. Xing is one of the social networks in Germany, and they essentially created this kind of what they call a privacy hub. Germany has been very kind of caring about security and privacy for a long time, but at Xing, essentially what they have is this central privacy hub, which is kind of a button at the bottom, which brings you to a page that looks like this, right? Which shows you, here's the information that we have on you, right? Because if you're logged in, this is what you can do with this information. This is what you can export. You have the right to be forgotten, and all the things that need to be obviously GDPR compliant. So if you go on Xing privacy policy or Xing privacy hub, let's see if I can find it here quickly. I hope that it didn't change much since then. Xing privacy hub. I never use Xing, but you can take a look. Yeah, you need to be logged in here because you will see a bit more. But this for me is a really great example of how it's done well. I'm going to type it in the chat here, right? It's all very clear. It's all very obvious, right? And it's nice. And at the same time, sometimes not very often, but sometimes you see companies doing this really cookie management button at the bottom, also in the footer. That seems to be where people expect it to be found as well, right? Or if you have a big menu button on the top, this is where you will probably have it as well. But it's essentially just a privacy button, which brings you to this area where you can toggle on and off all the things and learn about all the things that they have on you. And if I look here, let me see. There was something. Yes, they've changed it. But when I look back here, this is when it looks like when you logged in, I believe at least, right? Where it has kind of this overview, information you provide to us and information you have on you, and these are the data you can export. I don't know if it answers your question, but this is a very good starting point, I think. I also, by the way, talking about those things, have published a series of articles about privacy UX, which has many more examples too. It's a series of 4 articles. I'm going to paste it in the link in the chat here as well. Better cookie consent experiences, better notifications UX, and in general, what people care about when it comes to privacy. Because I was spending quite a bit of time in 2019 on privacy.
Okay, wow. Vitaly, unfortunately, we cannot solve all the web's problems today.
We can, Avi. Of course we can.
We can't. We can only maybe a fraction. So we have to end here. But I would like to invite everyone. Thank you, Vitaly, and everyone.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone. It's always a pleasure to see people, and also I would love to see you if you do happen to go, and if you like all the fancy whistles and bells and conversations about required and optional input fields. This workshop is always fun for me. It's great. Maybe see you there.
Hope to see you there. I'll send everyone a reminder email. Also, me and you, Vitaly, we're going to meet in a few weeks in Prague.
Yes.
Web Expo. If anyone wants to come to meet us there in Web Expo in Prague, that would be cool to see you.
An actual in-person conference with 1,700 people, like live people, like people. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so what I like to do, just to kind of end things, usually when we meet people in person in a conference, you go into a room and you start seeing who's there, who wants to talk, and shake hands and say, hi, what do you do? So it's a great opportunity to meet maybe a friend, a colleague, someone you can work with, someone you can interact with. So for the next 15 minutes, we're going to break out into small rooms and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, start a conversation, tell us what you do, and maybe what you learned today during this event. And I think that usually it's a very fun moment when you meet a stranger. You never know what you're going to get. But for the next 15 minutes, we can break that room. So I'll wait for everyone to let's see. Okay, so, and I'm going to still be here if you want to come and chat with me for the next 15 minutes.
Who doesn't want to chat with Avi?
Okay.
Yes.
So let's see, breakout rooms.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining, and maybe see you next time.
Are you going to stay, Vitaly, or you have to go?
I do need to eat, but I'll be back in a few minutes.
Okay, cool. So.
Okay, see you, everyone, in a moment. Or later.
Great. So,
oh, just one more thing. Oh, everybody's going on. Yeah. So if anybody wants to reach out or connect with me, I'm just going to paste the link, my email address, or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is probably easier. Let's see. Yes. So here we go. Feel free to connect, and then happy to have a conversations and chat later.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to open the rooms. Guys, it's random. Join in the room, and I'll see you in 15 minutes. And turn on your cameras so people can see you and all that good things.
Thank you, Avi, and everyone. It was a great talk.
Oh, thank you. See you next time.
See you, hopefully more.